I'm here on College Avenue with the Center for Social Justice Education and LGBT Communities. And this is Rainbow Talks.
Oh, that's an interesting question. So the first queer person in my life, when you say growing up, for me, I would have to say Walter Mercado was the first person growing up. The reason I say that is because when you are a queer Latino kid being in your mom's kitchen, you would always wake up and watch the astrology, and he would be the most flamboyant figure that would just give you the horoscope, but did it with such flair. They're just like, "Ooh, I love you. Look, give me more about my life," and then it'll bring me back into a situation of like, "Okay, got to do better in my life." But it was good. That was the first representation that I got. So,
We had TV representation.
TV representation, yeah, TV. Not TikTok, but TV work.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think for me, but it was my first is my family. I had no clue what was happening at the time, but my cousin was in his drag era, and I had no idea what it was. It was dressing up. Her name was Shabella. It was after Patti LaBelle. Patti LaBelle was his favorite artist, so imitating, trying to dress like her, kicking off the shoes. But I'm like knee-high to a grasshopper. I'm a young person, so I had no idea what was happening. I was nervous. I was scared, and no one was actually talking about what was happening. I was like, what? Why is he dressing up and singing and doing all of this? So that was my first introduction. I couldn't appreciate it then, but as I've grown up to understand who I am, then I was like, oh, this is what was happening, and I wish it was an explanation because me and my cousin could have been besties. You could have introduced me to me, and I didn't get that, but I can now appreciate it from what I was experiencing as a child. It would be at barbecues. It would be in my mom's kitchen. My mom is my grandma. She wanted us to call her mama. Right, anywhere there was people, there was a show. Right, so Shabella was present.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't have a person.
Oh,
I mean, it's like that,
For me, it was really more apparent in elementary school, middle school, just because I think that's when kids were really figuring themselves out, and obviously a lot of people would be like, oh, if a guy is doing something, they're like, oh, that's gay, and so that's how I was introduced to it. But I always knew being queer wasn't something wrong, but I was kind of just oh, it exists. But I thought of myself as a hetero, straight, and sexual person. I was kind of just there. And then at that time in middle school, a lot of girls in my class came out as queer, and they were lesbians and stuff, and no one had an issue with that. They had more so of an issue of guys who were gay. So for me, yeah, I guess the first people I knew were the girls in my middle school. So
yeah, I think for me as well, I didn't have too much representation within the home. I didn't really. I think my first memory of seeing something on TV was Boys Don't Cry. It's a 90s movie. I was and I remember turning to my mom and I'm so what's up with that? Can I? Because I'm transgender, so I was wondering, I'm can I cut my hair like that? Can I stuff my pants like that? And she was like, you see what happens at the end of the film, which is a tragic story. But after that, I think it wasn't until high school I went to an all-girls Catholic school, and then I found out some girls in my class like girls. I'm like, that's an option? We can do that? What's up? And then I didn't find out what transgender meant for real, in earnest, until college. I went into my first gay club meeting, and someone there identified as a transgender man. I'm like, oh my God, it goes so deep. I can do so much with that. So, but yeah.
Okay, so I came out twice. So I think it depends on the person, whether you want to come out or make it a whole thing. But for me, I thought it was important just because in middle school, I was conflicted about my asexuality. Do y'all know asexuality?
You can, yeah.
Okay.
You tell us.
I mean, there's different definitions for people, but for me particularly, it means that I have I don't want to say a lack of attraction, but I have less of an attraction for people sexually. But I'm still a romantic person. I still have romantic attraction for people. All people obviously, because I also identify as pan-romantic. So yeah, I first came out as ace in sophomore year high school. So that was the love that I found for that was I had a best friend who was also came out at the time as a trans man. And we both were going through that thing where we both came out, and it was weird because people treat us differently, but at the same time, we both advocated for each other in like different ways. Like when he wanted to like, use a bathroom or something and he didn't feel comfortable, like I advocated to the administration about, yo, can we have like a genderless bathroom and stuff like that. And he advocated for me when people questioned whether or not like I experienced like, I guess, sexual pleasure and things like that. And then when I came out as pan, it was more scarier because you're admitting that you're attracted to people outside of the binary rather than being like, oh, I'm not into having sex or I'm not sexually attracted to people. So that was really difficult for me, but I learned a lot about myself. And I think one thing I definitely love is honestly being able to love anyone that I want, like freely, now that I like affirmed that with myself. Yeah.
I just want to comment. I love that you were able to like have that kind of language like as early as like middle school and middle school. Cause like I feel like that's something that I noticed like coming out over the past couple of years. I'm 30 now, so like recognizing that like we're talking about these things in high school, middle school. That's like it's cool to see that culture shift.
That's a different. One of the things that I've loved after coming out, I would probably say is watching the ballroom scene from afar, right? So I'm not involved. I don't go to a lot of balls. I have been to at least 3, but being able to watch online and see what's happening, I feel like that's something I missed out on, and a community of people that I didn't have growing up or didn't know about until after I came out. So I admire it from afar and wish that I could be doing all of the things in all the categories, but I really enjoy watching. So the visuals and being open to kind of things that I didn't see. Thankfully, the social medias and the internet has the capability to share with me where I don't go often.
I love that for you. I would say this one is more of the answer I give to this one is interesting because I always look at it as like, okay, we're out. Yay. One, the privilege of being able to say I'm out. Yay. But then also thinking of who can I help in that space? Now having this privilege of being so confident to be like, I'm out. So a lot of that I would have to say is my fraternity. Because as soon as I crossed in my fraternity, I was the first queer brother of the chapter of my fraternity. But then afterwards, brothers started popping out of the woodwork. Some that were from different chapters, some that were from different parts of the country of different chapters, and then a few came out of my chapter. So it was an opportunity to not be like the sage, queer, but in a sense of like try to provide some sort of guidance of how to approach certain things. And sometimes in being part of a Latino fraternity, it could be hyper masculine, very hyper, you got to be tough, you got to be this, you got to machismo, all this. So for me, it was an opportunity to be like, well, you could if you want, you don't really have to. Like, let's talk about going out and talk about your life. Like, we don't have to talk about like being in that space. We could talk about like, what does it feel like if you feel comfortable enough to be queer and out, and then also having the identity being part of a fraternity, of how, as a person that's now out in that space and has gone through experience, how I can make it better, or how can I help in that type of guidance. And for some, I could say that's helped. For some, they find it on their own, but I feel like the purpose of it is that for visibility is just like someone is here, at least. So, and I love that at least like in Greek and fraternity, sorority life culture, that's been evolved, especially within the Latino communities. There's a lot of our Latino fraternities and sororities that now have evolved in relation to having a lot more queerness out within their membership. So that's also been a win within all of that. So it's been a fun time.
So we've always teaching people that allyship cannot just be something that you name yourself, right? Like, but I'll lean more into the discussion of allyship is action. It's daily action, daily advocacy. Successful allyship is not always speaking for us, especially if you don't have the permission to, but to recognize your privilege, recognize where you have an opportunity to lift the experiences, the struggles, the needs of communities that you may or may not be a part of, and see to it that we are kind of in an equitable space. I think allyship is also rooted in a lot of love and care. Like, we need to be invested in the well-being of others. And not everyone always sees it that way. However, it's like, I want to be an ally. I am an ally. Yes, and when the going gets tough, right, and the conversation gets hard, or what are you doing now that laws are changing and like people are just kind of erasing queer and trans people? Like now is the time for your allyship to kind of increase. But there's so many layers to allyship that we can discuss. So I'll let y'all get into it, but that's where I'll start. It's action based.
I want to piggyback off of what you said, because I think even in the LGBTQ plus community, like we should be allies to each other. Because I know from my experience, when I talk to people about like my asexuality or something, they're like, "What?" Like they don't know what it is, and I don't expect every queer person to know about what asexuality is. But the way like they came towards me, like the things that they said, and even like the things that they say online, I was just so surprised. And like even me, like I work at a like queer camp, and I'm just like the things that like queer people say to each other is just like very disheartening. And I'm just like, we are a part of the same community, just like with people of color and their own individual communities. I'm just like, the fact that we're doing these things and saying these things to each other is truly disheartening. And I, as someone who is an ally to the trans people, to gay people, to lesbians and everyone else, even though I don't necessarily identify with those identities, like I am here to learn. And I think that's something that's really important, just to sit and be like, I am here to listen and I am here to learn and internalize and understand what you're saying. And I think a lot of the time in like my college career, when I have an opportunity to like research about sexuality or gender, I specifically go towards things that I don't know. Okay, I'm going to take it in like a sexuality way and gender. So it was like elementary school. Like a lot of people, like not even these days, but just like in general, this whole idea that, oh, children can't know who they are, what they are, or how they feel. Like I feel like that's incorrect. Like I felt it so early on. And it wasn't even about my asexuality. I just realized that I saw gender and sex like a different way. Like even when I was playing with other girls and stuff like that, I just saw myself in the male role. And I just didn't really care to be a girl, I guess. That obviously has changed because I do identify as a woman, but even then I feel like I identify as a woman politically. Like I don't know if that makes sense, but like I like when it comes to politics, I'm like, yes, I'm a woman. But like on a day-to-day basis, I don't really care about what pronouns you use for me. Like it's not something that I think about. Honestly, I just use she, her as like, okay, this is a quick way. I don't have to explain to you, oh, well, I don't really care about pronouns, blah, blah, blah. You get what I mean. But yeah, it was elementary school. I always wore suits to church. For some reason, my mom didn't have an issue with that. I cut my hair at that time. It wasn't super short, but it was like pretty short. I was friends with like a lot of guys, but I also was attracted to a lot of my friends. And weirdly enough, like in middle school, like I used to follow a lot of trans men on Instagram, and I was attracted to them. And I was like, what is this? Like, I was like, okay, cool. And then I guess that was a sign of my pansexuality. But yeah, like it was like in middle school when I also saw that people were like, it was like puberty. People were like, oh my God, like let's have sex, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, I'm okay. Like, I was like, you know what? And then people would be like, oh, so when are you going to have sex with your partner? I was like, maybe like 10 years. And they're like, okay, now you can marry me. And they're like, okay, whatever. But yeah, like I think it was like middle school for me in terms of like being ace. But I could only affirm it in high school just because I was struggling with the fact that like I was ace and what that meant for me like in the future regarding like having a partner, having a family and things like that. And then like in high school, I struggled with my pan romanticism because I was into my best friend who was trans. And I was just like, oh, like, what is this? And it was weird because I was interested in them before transition and then after transition. So it was like really weird. But yeah, that was definitely a sign. But yeah, like it was high school and it was also middle school.
Very envious. You have so many good experiences. And like I didn't know half of this stuff before, in my middle school.
The internet. I don't know. I had too much access.
All I had was MySpace, and even that was prehistoric. All I remember was like the top 8, top 12.
The dig for anything queer there. Like,
really, I like typed, I don't like sex or something, and they're like, you might be asexual, and I was like, what is this? And then I like kept digging, and I was like, oh my God.
I'm like, I wish I had.
Yeah, so jealous, but so happy for you at the same time. So that you have that access that many of us like had no clue what that language was even,
except aim and going to the chat room.
Right. And I feel like chatting with strangers.
Be like, what was it? Be like, for those that had AOL.
No, we think that's so bad.
Like, if you had AOL, what was your screen name?
Where's your screen name? Like, okay.
No.
Yeah, that was it.
I didn't know what that was.
I think taking that that answer, I think I've realized when I was different, I would have to compare the school. I was part of different clubs on campus in school. I think the attraction I had for same sex had occurred from a very young age. So it happened in elementary school, but then it transcended. It evolved like when I got more into high school. In middle school, I try to like exit out because I was kind of like, oh my God, I shouldn't be feeling this way. But I think taking it from that aspect of a sexual position of it, I felt like I was different in elementary school. There was a guy that I really had an infatuation with when I was in elementary and summer camp. And then afterwards, I didn't know what to do with it. So then at the end of it, I was also trying to figure out what is it that I was comfortable or like in relation to romantic, dating, those type of things. So I just felt like even though there was like I had girlfriends and it was cool, but at the end of it, I also had always in the back of my mind like, what was that? And I think it was further affirmed for me in high school as I was getting closer to senior year with the coming out to the most out student in high school, in which he was also out. So I felt like for some reason I gravitated towards him to understand like, hey, I think I'm bi or gay. I don't know, but I'm something there. But I think the interest of just being a little bit more comfortable and just being in the space that I can go to someone was a good end result. But it was really like elementary school that it all kind of went down. And
Thank you for watching and happy Pride Month. Let us know what we should be talking about in the comments.